Let me pick up on something you just said about responsible adults. It's a moment that I think everyone has seen by now. In 2008, John McCain confronted one of his own supporters at an event in Michigan. I was about 15 feet away from him, and it stopped all of us in our tracks. But the part of the story that doesn't always get told is that the disinformation was coming from his running mate, Sarah Palin. And the calls that John McCain would get on the bus from his former Senate colleagues, most of them from the Democratic side of the aisle, but there was a conversation, as you just said, Ben Rhodes, among adults. Who are the adults right now on the Republican side of the aisle? I don't count any.
Yeah, I mean, and I want to be very clear, like, it's not that everybody needs to agree about every issue. Let's get back to fighting about the size of government or taxation or national security policy or the Iran deal.
Yeah.
They can hate every single thing that, for policy that Joe Biden puts forward. But if we can't agree on facts in this country, and we can't agree on democracy in this country, and then we can't agree that the president of the United States claiming that he won an election that he clearly lost and lost by a pretty good margin, that the entire Republican Party shouldn't go along with that. I mean, you would think, Nicolle, and you know the party better than I, that there are people who were around before Trump and had a political identity before Trumpism kind of took over the Republican Party. People like Rob Portman, who served with you in the Bush administration. People, rock solid conservatives who did not come out of a stew of conspiracy theory. There are a lot of those people left over there. And they know this isn't true. They know. I cannot possibly believe, Nicolle, that most of these elected Republicans think that, like, the Dominion voting machines in Georgia were part of some deep state conspiracy. They know it's not true. I mean, Ted Cruz, who said he'd argue these cases before the Supreme Court, he knows this is not true. Shame on him. He's doing this for what? So that he can, tap into some of Trump's support if he wants to run for president in a few years? It's not worth it. It's not worth poisoning the well of American democracy just to score some points with, like, the conspiracy theorist base that Trump has created here.
I want to come back to what's happening on the streets and outside the homes of public servants, because another battlefield is the policy debates around how to protect ourselves from the raging coronavirus pandemic before vaccinations are available. And I want to give a little bit of context before I show this. In Idaho, the state health board was debating some public health measures. I don't think it was as cut and dry as just a mask mandate, but different measures for protecting different parts of the state. And I want to show you what one member, the terror that she was driven to. This is Diana Glacanodio, an Idaho health board member. Let's listen and we'll talk about it on the other side, Clint.
My 12-year-old son is home by himself right now, and there are protesters banging outside the door, okay? I'm going to go home and make sure he's okay.
So she is a member of the Idaho Health Board. Their topic was public health measures to protect citizens of their state from the coronavirus pandemic. They had to stop the meeting before they were going to vote on a revised health order that would have put in place some new restrictions because the pandemic is raging there. Clint, she was obviously feeling terrorized. There were protesters outside her home. Her 12-year-old son was home alone. This is a protest outside the health board offices. When do these threats and people feeling terrorized, at what point does that intersect with law enforcement?
Yeah, it's fascinating, Nicolle. Imagine it was 2008 and 2009, and we were listening to Anwar Al-Awlaki talk about martyrs and people needing to show up and defend whatever their belief system is. And it is happening right now all across the country. We could probably pick 5 or 6 locations around the U.S. right now where there are protests. We have Americans showing up with guns, right? But not just on public property now. We see them showing up on private property. So this is that line for law enforcement, right? Like, what is peaceful assembly and what is clearly inciting violence or threatening violence or mobilizing? And I imagine for state and local law enforcement right now, particularly in some of these states where you've seen a lot of Trump supporters start to move and mobilize. We saw it from Gabriel Sterling last week, right? He was talking about people conducting routes and reconnaissance. Guess what we used to do during the counterterrorism era? Who's doing reconnaissance around public buildings? So it's really fascinating how our frame has changed because it's part of our own political leadership that's doing this. I think at this point, there's been several instances that have crossed the line. I think we have a scaling problem, though, and also a problem where the FBI has been degraded in terms of its public reputation. I think the FBI has done amazing work over the last 4 years, but the president's caused harm to the FBI. They are not trusted in the same way in Trump country as they were in 2015 or 2016. So now imagine you're a federal officer going out there. You're trying to work with state and locals. Some of those state and local law enforcement are also elected, which means they may or may not be in total alignment with what's going on. We've seen a lot of sheriff's departments say they wouldn't enforce mask mandates, for example. We've got some weird currents in the country, and I don't know how this ends without violence and death, meaning that we'll have a tragic incident. Then you will see the politicians, and we've seen this happen before with mass shooters. I've been on your show a couple of years ago, Nicolle, and we watched a shooting, you know, at a Walmart in Texas. And then people come and it's thoughts and prayers and we got to do things about it. But we could have this kick off in a domino effect over the next couple weeks or even couple months. And to be honest, Nicolle, part of my biggest worry is post-inauguration. When Trump is not the president, we now have extremists out there. They are plotting and planning. There are no targets for them because it's COVID-19. That's part of it right now. We're all at home. So there's a very limited number of ways they can attack. I'm worried about the Timothy McVeigh, you know, the Eric Rudolph types going back to the 90s, those case studies of what's the summer of 2021 going to look like if we continue with this sort of rhetoric and this polarization in this country.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.